Alright, that Sani, that was a better baby, that Chera, Zivaina, that Sani, Sevachi, Denba, and Shiva Sakatawa, goes to Rova, to the Dida, that was Shiva Sakata, Ringalia, and then I some of Nata, then Yamlenchia, Korea, and Dikor Mashiero.
Good morning. So this teaching is being offered at the time of Sakadawa, and so the topic of this teaching is going to present what we should be thinking about or reflecting on, and thereby what practices we should be engaging in during this period of Sakadawa.
Shiva Sakadawa said, Za Chimbochi Dan, Ge Chimbochi, and Delia, and then Geshe Thubten, and then Jikasunum Namyunda, Mitawana, Sunum Chia, Saigo, Resi Sungurwa.
And this period of Sakadawa is seen as a period of great importance because the virtue that we accumulate has so much more strength. So all the virtue that is accumulated during this period has so much more strength than it would have at another time.
Chisanda Sakadawa said, Dusuti, Dawati, Dusuti, and Chikia Chimbochna, Chimbo Zugubi, Kimsen, Garre, Labna, that Dumbasanja Jumniti, and Ya, and Chimbozuba, Sangi, Viki, Dusuti in Barwa.
And the reason that this period of Sakadawa is seen as so important and precious is because it is the anniversary period of Buddha's enlightenment.
Delia, and Sungtaro, Chiki, Laptaro, New Gore, Benangazo, Taba, Tamanbegi, and Jinga, Tadangazuki, Madinina, and Disugi, Karasungorasna, San Yujamne Didi, Yama, and Nazuna Shinchin, and the Gasore, Semje, Aningaji, Dini, Lobsang, Dene, Dubanyam, and the San Yavare Sungurwa.
There are two ways to look at this. One is in accordance with the presentation in the Theravada tradition, which is that the being that was to become Buddha Shakyamuni was born as a human. He made great efforts in his training, and he attained enlightenment.
And the Chogu number 2 Sangi, number 2 the Chogu, and the Sangi 2 temperatures.
The explanation in the Mahayana tradition is that in a previous life, the practitioner became an enlightened being, attained enlightenment in a previous life. In this life, already as an enlightened being, he appeared in an ordinary aspect and acted out the role of a wheel-turning Buddha. So whether one takes to the presentation that the Buddha was born as an ordinary person and attained enlightenment in that life, or the second presentation where it was in a previous life he attained enlightenment and then appeared in this life already as enlightened being, isn't of great importance, because whichever presentation one follows, the Buddha Shakyamuni would have in a life been an ordinary being until the point when in that particular life enlightenment was achieved. So in other words, in a life prior to enlightenment, he would have been an ordinary being such as ourselves.
And the main because military media and the Chicama Chambo and the chicken and the Nanas and Mongolia and the Nana and Gansan Julia can watch and do sin and the Sheen and the Mava Charu body, Chicama Mongo, you see what it is.
Gott erkennen Uzug du den Geshe Thubten ko la sing yu pe
Geshe Thubten ko sing ko ba Tangpa Geshe Thubten nyema kimba chene shudu kabla lobchong ji shudu kabla ane gara thongwa re la na assembly ge ji ka ji thongwa re sen Tangpa Geshe Thubten ko sing ko he ko
de The being that was to become Buddha Shakyamuni, whichever presentation one adheres to, the being that was to become Buddha Shakyamuni, he observed the suffering that pervades samsara. So if we just take as an illustration of the human realm, he would have observed the suffering of illness and aging, and he would have been moved by what he saw. So whether there was a pandemic in the world or not at that time, one doesn't know, but he would have seen what was around him at that time in the same way that we too can now.
Yungure Karachene, Ganishena, and Duma Tayalia, Lobsang Dorje, Lam Rim Text, Yagar, Tugures, Tusine, Jabaji, Jedu, and then Rabjung, Rabduchumaina, Rabjung Chebaina, and then Chichibi, Lam Rim Text, and Gohama, Gores, Carson, Kimba Chebaina, Uda, and Elchik, Korada, Dini Monguchilada, Dinichewa, and Chichi, Kohopla, Yuma Madre. Rabjung Chebaina, Chichi, Kohop, Sanwa, and Yara, and Dinisin go Geshe Thubten and go Rabjung Pedwada.
Seeing the multitude of problems and difficulties that torment beings, then the being that was to become Buddha, he investigated this, analyzed this, coming to investigated what are the methods by which one can gain freedom from suffering. And in this process of investigation, he saw that it was best to enter the homeless life or go forth from ordinary life, what later would become known as taking ordination. And the reason that he saw that this was best was that it presented one with the opportunity, the best opportunity to train and transform one's mind, in that one was removed from the obligations and responsibility of the life of a householder, the obligations relating to raising and caring for a family and ensuring financial security and so forth. So he saw that going forth or entering the homeless life, the life of ordination, was the best technique to present one with the opportunity for transforming one's mind. In the judicial presentation, he then went forth from his life of comfort and engaged in austere practices for a period of 6 years, his body becoming emaciated from the strength of the austerities that he was in, or the severity of the austerities that he was engaging in.
All that in the Lord Drury, Kawachi, Kulik, Kawachi, the Subuchi, the Kuzuchi, and Gamboshu, Chand, Dene, and Sangi Kemba, that Jebachi, the Karchi, King Goras. Chesando Kawachi, Subulia, Kawatan, Tedu, Chebatu, Subuko, Chava, and did some Denichi, Sanjoko to Midu, Chesang and the Sanjoko Tobala, Den Ludindia, and Yabochu would do something, and Yaya, and this empty that Kawatan, Jene, and the Kalamaza to Kawachi, Jebi, Subuko, Chana, and Sanjoko Tobala to Jedinza, and yes, Chevrolet, Subosu. Dene, and two papers, then ye, and Jashu Shin Julia, Yambar Shache, Gom Japche, dine, and Dusino Gom Japche, Shiva Saga Taviki, Shibiki, Tsaba Jonga Nimotella, Shogo Mobu, Tangan Chuse, Chuse Sumba, Yama Chagura, Shogo, Torang Sigur, and Dinichilia, and then Mobazuka Sanjeva, Ejide.
But after this extensive period of engaging in these severe austerities, he saw that this was not a technique that will lead to liberation from suffering. His body had become emaciated, but his mind hadn't attained freedom. So therefore, seeing that this technique wasn't leading to the desired goal, he took nourishment and to sustain his body, to give energy once again. Moved to what would become known as Bodh Gaya and sat under the Bodhi tree. And there, at probably around 3 a.m. in the early hours of the morning of the first day of what became known as Sakadawa, he attained enlightenment.
Sankhyevaenza, Tati Nyomba Jiba Bachada Jeba Chasan Bangware, Mama Sui Bangsar. And the Bangni and the Shiji Yundin Kengo Bachasan Kentawarwa, Kembarwa. Chizan Dini Ken Jikende, that the Diniga Sanya German did, and a Chamba Simjan Tam Jigi Dunga Se and Digi Dubla Jamba and Zevi Rashin Chen. Diniza and Di Sanyoko Toru and Dinigi Chason Wada Sanyidi.
Kunne de tjekke det her meget godt så at det bare bang den drop den idé.
Denne zewe danyi je sim zhuo sim jing ge dunga se den di yu zhu ye ge zewe ra xin zhan an denne ge duo le wa da.
Attaining, as we hear here, that the Buddha in the early hours of the first of Sakadawa attained enlightenment. And so then, what does enlightenment itself mean? It means that on the one hand, all obscurations, all stains on his mental continuum, even the most subtle, have been completely eradicated. So there's not even the slightest trace of an obscuration remaining. And in conjunction with this, all good qualities have been developed to the level or the state of perfection. So therefore, an omniscient consciousness is attained, a consciousness that is freed from all limitations because all stains have been completely eradicated, and a consciousness where all good qualities have been developed to the furthest extent, the extent of perfection. And with such a consciousness, then the motivating aspiration of being of greatest benefit to others can then be achieved, can then be actualized.
Dini ge sankhye ne, dini sankhye ne, and that, Jugi, Drawasem Jingi, Dunga Se, Diki Tubiaki, Tablam di, and the Sanji Chu, and then Jiki, bottom of Gidishidon, and Chur, bottom of Sonyorba.
Having achieved enlightenment, then, Buddha embarks on the dissemination of this faultless technique to achieve the same state that he had achieved, the state of perfection. And he gave innumerable teachings to beings in accordance with their dispositions on how to become Buddhas.
Di Nyamlin Jebalatin, Sanji, Koban Toke, Mabuchungore, and Di Nyamlin Jeke, Janju Sempa Pato Mebachungore, and Di Nyamlin Jeke, and a Jiki, Nyantuena, Rangi, Lam Nyamlin Chicken, Pato Mebachungorva, Di Mase, and a Jik, Lam Guleki Matuba in Nayang, Church again, Daddy Bardo, Daddy Bardo, and San Yuchum Chesu Tranji, San Yuchum Sonshi, Churtela, Lapchi, Nyamlin Chianzulia, and a Jiki. Chasa Tiki to your Shenley, Pember to Yare, Arangi, Chikiwa Chimigi, Lada Miwa, Densamba Toyare, Setigi, and Digi, some Chasa, Denigi, and Chi Yamne Chebala, Dine, and Denigi Pando, Didadebado, Yujiba Chagurva.
And when the Buddha started disseminating the teachings of the Dharma, he gave all those before him the opportunity to firstly hear the unmistaken techniques to becoming enlightened, not only to be liberated from suffering, but becoming a perfected being. And moreover, not only did he give the opportunity to beings to hear these teachings, but to, whilst hearing, reflect on their meaning. And as the meaning arises within them in an unmistaken way, to engage in actual meditation on this unmistaken technique. And it's through hearing, reflecting, and meditating, and thereby engaging in practice, the practice of hearing, reflecting, and meditating on the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, that uncountable beings since then to now have attained the state of enlightenment themselves. Moreover, there are uncountable beings who are in the world right now who are bodhisattvas and are rapidly progressing towards attaining their own enlightenment for the sake of others. Moreover, there are many beings who have achieved the state of a hero or solitary realizer, foe destroyer, or who are progressing towards such a state. And not only are there those who have achieved, or in the process of rapidly achieving their final goal, but there are many who have achieved a state of far greater happiness that is being experienced in this life, a state, and moreover, of being able to be of great benefit to others in this life, and thereby can have conviction that from life to life they are on the paths where they will achieve ever greater calm and inner peace and transformation, and be of ever greater benefit to others from life to lifetime. So this is the state that in the world right now for beings, and has been continuously in an unbroken lineage from when Buddha Shakyamuni achieved his enlightenment.
Sanya jumne de dambo ane gebe guo rabchung kasa kimbache tene ane chig rabchung che tene gom jab ane kawar che tene ane chig yangya ane so she shela chu tene yang tingi zile nyambasha sangyo kobang top tene ki top che topati garasung go pesyo ni ngarang so pe garu tun go de labna chisa koala ya ningbo yo mares chisa koala ningbo me ba de samtang 안 될이야 아는 거 저기 될래 타야게 탑람을 배주 지고 그래서 나 탑람을 배주 제고야 될라 간이 제고 그러려나 아는 거 저기 당보 하나 저기야 안 도치네 탑람 기 배주 제기 냠는 제 취시 냠는 제데 약쇼에다 약중 제가 있나 약중 지고 간제래 돌나라 먼저 융의 니치도 수름송 송고 그래서 그러다 라중 제도 수름 소야기도 나와 진짜 수름 송고 그래서 대다 되네기 안 수름 마송바 있나 아니 거기 타고 거기 저투 말 진짜 수름 송 되네 아니야 안 퇴섬 퇴바지 삼바지 된다 곰 잡아 있나 아니 거기 동화 타다 저투 그래서 아니 경화조에 되네 제고 그래서 지금 들려 뼈선 마선 뒤된 거 같다.
The traditional story that we're most familiar with the being that became Buddha Shakyamuni was that he was born as a prince, and then coming to observe suffering in the world, he went forth from princely life, and he engaged in great effort where for 6 years he embarked on a path of severe austerities to try and gain freedom from suffering. Seeing that this was not a successful technique, he once again took sustenance, physical sustenance, and then under the Bodhi tree attained enlightenment. So the way then that we should look at this is that we should see that Buddha Shakyamuni was presenting an example for us to follow. This wasn't just something that happened, but rather this process itself was a teaching. And the example that Buddha was presenting is that samsara has no essence. there's nothing worthy of striving for if it is within the nature of samsara, in other words, in the nature of suffering. And therefore, rather one needs to turn one's attention or transform one's way of thinking to focus on a state freed from some cyclic existence. And to achieve this, practicing the Buddha Dharma is the supreme method because it is the sole method that leads to liberation and enlightenment. And in this example the Buddha set, a key component is his going forth or to his ordination. And what is the meaning of going forth or ordaining? It means to practice, it means to develop an ethical outlook. It means to practice ethical conduct or to be ethically restrained. That is the meaning of ordination, of going forth. The way to do that successfully, as well as to build on this, is to hear teachings, reflect on them, and meditate on them. This is the unmistaken technique. To be ethically restrained, and to be so, one needs to hear, reflect, and meditate, and to progress on that basis, one needs to hear, reflect, and meditate. This is the example Buddha Shakyamuni set in his life story.
상이 코롱기 냠용을 토하네 간에간에 냠내 지고 가르갈 빠가르 지고래서 냠용을 토하네 하는 알아줄이야 안 동아세야 된 디기줄이 최 빠도메 봐 송시에 안 직판도 빼 마세 야치 뭐 중월에 당 알아줘이네 최 냠내 제 상이 줌내 디기 지수 장하지 최 냠내 지 되네 고고라 빼 마세 야고래 삼제 두신의 좀 상이 줌내 디기 그지 제 제 하는 것도 이게 시바 근데 시비기 다 될이야네 그래 시바 나라야 상이 줌내데 안 띵에서 냠바샤야다 안 상기베 제가 빼마서 뒤지때 되네 자침보래 지데 되네 인자 뇌이나야 되네게 냠내 제투가 지인생비 아주 삼로 되네 다제 당외인다 제가 시 당외는 알아서야 지금 선음 치고 쌓아야지 차고로 와
being that became Buddha Shakyamuni, or the example that he set, whichever way one chooses to look at the traditional story, was that he was born as a prince, but seeing, coming to observe for himself that no one in the world is freed of suffering. He developed definite emergence, profound definite emergence, or to express that differently, he renounced the sufferings of samsara, he renounced cyclic existence, and then he went forth, or to express that differently, he ordained. And then, generating bodhicitta, he strove to become completely freed of suffering, but not solely for his own sake, but for all suffering beings. And with such a motivation, he achieved enlightenment. And then today is the anniversary of the Buddha's birth and enlightenment. So here the purpose of us celebrating this enlightenment, the purpose of it, of his birth and enlightenment being celebrated and us recalling it, is so that we can recall that cyclic existence is pervaded by suffering, but that freedom from this suffering is possible. It has been achieved by the Buddha himself and all the beings in this unmistaken lineage who have achieved their goals of liberation and enlightenment, as well as all those who are rapidly progressing to the achievement of those goals right now. And the purpose of recollecting that those 2 points then, the enlightenment of the Buddha and the lineage of all beings who followed, was to see how truly fortunate we are, that we live in a time where the Buddha's teachings have not only been taught, but they remain, and they are being practiced by greatly skilled practitioners. And here we can generate a strong sense of fortune that we have, as well as the kindness of the Buddha in particular, as well as all those who have and are keeping his teachings alive. And the purpose then of rejoicing like this and reflecting on their incomparable kindness is firstly to accumulate vast stores of virtue and moreover to commit to following in the footsteps of the Buddha and all the great practitioners, and to commit to utilize what remains of our opportunity to transform our way of thinking, transform our minds, and live a life of true meaning.
Shiva Saga Dawasi, Sebi Jonga Delia, and Tini Sanyu Jumnen, the Dingis, Nyambaja, Sangi, Sanyo Tovari, setting out Sanyu Jumnen, and Sankiene, and Sanyi answer the Chuso, Pando Chimbuchuaris me, and Sanyu Jumnen, the Gidin Jiden Chiada, Jiden Ligorba, the Mi Shiva Saga, and the Bendigo, Dawini Badan, or Sanyu Jumnen, Delia Sankieva, she said, the Dingoma, Dayoma, Sankra Gayomara. She said, Dineza. Shiba Tebe Jongo do Sang Yaba, the Sang Yelia, Dingis, Yamba Shaba. Mas Disoya, Azuki Dondala, Joasimje, Dumas, and Digidun, Digidria Dondal, Dust in the San Yokoma, Yambasha, San Yokoma, Toba, San Yokoma, Chepatomeba, Sonji, Pandachimashu Junior. Bemas Yapori, Sanyi, Indian Tiana, Sanji, Kidin Tiana. And Marai, the Nigi on the Sanjiki, Sumbi Chetil and Yamna Jet, Jehudo Sembi, and Chet, Yamna Dumba, Daniel to Shukche, the next some Dadu, Sanji, Kidin Taya, Sanji, and Chet, Kawatebalia, Jesu Irajia, and the Sosora line, Che Yamna Dumba Shukche, Gigioba Inzang. The Nigi to Telia, she be Sagata Kapla, the Nigi Sama Kituaza, the Nigi Tone, that's also a casual Katubine, and Sonum Chess, I guess, the Ruchua.
The reason that it's said that during the 15 days or the 30 days of Sakadawa one accumulates so much virtue is because one is being an anniversary of Buddha's birth and enlightenment, then one is turning one's attention to what the Buddha achieved and reminding ourselves that he did this for our sake and for the sake of all our loved ones and all beings. So this then leads us to naturally reflect on the great kindness of the Buddha and rejoice in what the Buddha achieved, as well as the kindness and rejoice in what was achieved by the entire lineage of followers. And with our entire Buddhist world, rejoicing and reflecting on the kindness of these great practitioners together, huge stores of virtue are created. And then thirdly, in addition to rejoicing and reflecting on kindness, together with all others in our Buddhist world, the thought arises, I too want to achieve a state freed of suffering. And I will do this, and as a follower of the Buddha, I will achieve this by following in the Buddha's footsteps, and following in the footsteps of the entire lineage of great practitioners. So it's for these reasons that we are doing this together with our entire Buddhist world, reflecting on the kindness, rejoicing in what has been achieved, and committing to do the same ourselves to transform our lives. That great virtue is accumulated in this period.
Nieba, Seva, Seba Jonga, Sang Yeba, Dusi Nieba, Suyo, Dusi Tel, some down, Dusi Tel, Odiri, some and Trent to a legal, Chisa de Niki, to Kitcher, Kuno, Jisha, Jisu Iraja, San Yu, Jada, or the Niki, and Ni, then the Shia would simply do by Kia, the Ungorwa, Benedigo, Damazuki, the Munin out and the Yumbarwa, Bendigo, depending as a Martin, Zamchi, must be Tujin Siash to Namjune, some Chaco, Dico, Kogo, Marwa, that you see nearby to the Seran, the Nichil, do you see a day said, part nearby Suesha, Yoenza, Seran Dimini Matele Chasangi, Anima Martin Capilla, meeting Mamma Shiba, some big, then Yanam could do share, Deliana, Nisha some daddy, and indeed, do you tell you detain, do you tell it in the Lamsa, Chetuorwa, on the Najiro, the Shiva Saga, the Sevachon San Yabare said. Sachimbo, do sit in the shadow, and do sit in the layer, then the getting the lower layer, or that did you sit Direta and some other Deliand, Gesani getting Chesotaya, Sanji Ki in the entire, and a Sanji, Debachea, and Cho Puyala, so what Gashimbo, Chesan Shiva Saga, the relationship and Gawache, your says. Kimzen Jini dire, Jine, and du Sudan, Sanyegi, the Nigi Gablia, Java in the Java and Denigi. Dudang, Dusu Tone Yang, Jiggy Gawaches, Child, Yonsibade, is that and Dinero.
If we think of the purpose that anniversaries, that recalling anniversaries serves, well, we can take, for example, recent anniversaries of both VE Day or Anzac Day. So there, the entire nation turns their mind, or turns their attention towards recalling those who have fallen in these wars, fallen to prevent the calamity that, in particular, the Second War, as well as perhaps the first, presented. And so here we recall those who have died, and we will generate the hope for that the world can live in peace and harmony together. So we don't normally think like this. This isn't thought, people don't go around their daily lives recalling those who have died in war and thinking about the need for world peace. But on anniversaries, hearing that today is an anniversary for something specific, one's mind naturally goes to the cause of that anniversary, or what one is remembering, meant to remember on that anniversary. So this is exactly the same as the purpose that Sakadawa performs. Knowing that today is Sakadawa, immediately one turns one's mind to what is being remembered in this anniversary, the Buddha's birth and enlightenment. And remembering then, or in dependence on recalling that today is the anniversary of Buddha's appearance in this world through his birth, as well as his showing of enlightenment, then we can reflect on the great kindness of the Buddha, as well as our great fortune to live in a time now where his teachings and examples still abides through the lineage of practitioners, and thereby we can give rise to a wish to attain a state of freedom from suffering too. And in this way we achieve a tremendous merit in joining our Buddha's world together in recalling this. So this is one reason why so much virtue is accumulated in the period of Sakadawa. Another reason would be to point to, well, it is the actual astrological time, it is the exact under the same full moon and so forth, that Buddha achieved his enlightenment. And thereby one also achieves more merit for the same activities than otherwise one would.
Dine Sanyo Jumne de Sang Yen Arzulia, Arzugu, Draw Simja Tamjig Dundala Sanki, Sang Yasane, Tasanyo Jumne de Korongi, Yam Yong Tone, Arzulia, Dunga Set, and Digi Tree, Tablam, Yamlin Jeta, Koche, Baudo Mebaji, Sun Yorwada.
Buddha, having achieved enlightenment, he had achieved this perfected state whereby he was then able, under the power of his bodhicitta, to teach how others can achieve that same perfected state. And he was teaching, of course, as a Buddha, not based on mere intellectual knowledge, but on experience that had been achieved on the basis of knowledge. And therefore he was able to teach the perfect, the unmistaken path to the achievement of the self-same state of omniscience that he himself had achieved.
Lama Tangpa Geshe Tangpa says, Korongi that San Yujimnendiki and Chiki Jesu Traja, San Yujimnendiki, Sumbana, Korongi that Nyamle Nyamlin Nane, that Koronji Nyamyon Tone, Marazole, that San Yujimnendiki, Sunshepe Tone, Dulce Nyamlin, D Tone, Koronji Nyamlin Nadi, Marazolma, and the Nyamlin Nadama, and the Tsiki in the Duchima. And the catching Buyoga, those in Lochon, Tikiama, somewhere, Chesa, Deton and Yamlena, that didn't have the Denma, Lojo Timi court, that
following in the lineage of great teachers that achieved realization based on training exactly like Buddha Shakyamuni himself did, we turn our attention to the text that we're going to look at from today, that written by the great Kadampa Lama Geshe Langri Tangpa. So he taught in a way that's the same as the Buddha, through hearing and reflecting and meditating on the Buddha's teachings. Based on this knowledge, he gained transformative experience. And on the basis of knowledge and experience, his own personal experience, he taught this abbreviated text that contains such vast meaning and depth. So this is what we're going to start to look at today, the 8 verses of mind training. The first verse, with the thought of attaining enlightenment for the welfare of all beings, who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will constantly practice holding them dear.
Dingy Dewa Sanjikova, Tobudu, Tarbata, Sanjikova, Tobudu, Sambiki, Samlo Yukendiki, Dani, or this or that, this one. And the Karche or Lana, Dani, Simjan Tamjela, Jinubo, Le Happy, Chita, Simjan Tamjelia, Ane, Mazupe, Jin Noble Nashiri, the Zachimuchi, the Jin Noble Habares, and Simjan Tamjela, Jin Noble Habare, some doubt, some doubt.
The very first line of this text in Tibetan is the word I, and then the words all sentient beings. So that's what one finds in the first line. I, all sentient beings. So by starting the text like this, he's immediately showing that he recognizes that he and all sentient beings are exactly the same, in that no being desires even the slightest of difficulty or problems, but wants to experience lasting, stable happiness. So in the very first line of the text, he is showing that there is no difference between oneself and others, in that all desire freedom from pain, freedom from suffering. The second line then goes on to show how important others are when compared to one. How important others are. And we have it in our third line, who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So even something like a wish-fulfilling jewel, sentient beings are more important than such an object.
Tarbata Tamje Kibio go top to hand, Gaza de Sosiura. Jisan Semjen Tamje, Yijin Noble Lavare, and the Zachimu said. Yijin Noble said, and to get that Jidan Yijin Noble said, no, which is your that Delia, Monam, Yavana, Karina, Jixosus, 고야기 근데 사야 동야 라서 바다 차상 된다 두그레 시노 시오르 숨으로다 다 대중 안 저게 뭐선데 맞은 통과 말하다 이내 당한 저 대상 안 저게 전불리나래야 노부릭 지리게다 세다 근데 지게 도시 파람라서 봐도 무이다 저소다 이시 노부식으로 지는 노부 인자 대소라 가려용으로서는 도시 파람다 세로 주요배는 안어서 배고자 신부는 지디나 근데 뭐고 나네 차상 자체와 도시 파람다 세디게 자치 지고로 와다 가르치는 자치 지고로서는 내봐 내 여봐이나 네 돈에 안어서야 세디게 튕기로 가르나 루투고로 가르치는 디종바는 디텔레는 무이라 되네 텔레는 아주 강바자야데 둘로녀야데 사야 동야데 허레 밀로로바지야데 차상한테 되네기 노고 달세다 도시 파는 여바이는 텔레는 빼마시게 가지고 야신 것이 두고로 와 차상 이신 노고세 된시로 와
Moreover, with the first line saying just I, all sentient beings, implicit in this is the purpose of this text, the purpose that the practitioner is striving for, which is to become enlightened for the sake of others, because all beings want to be liberated from suffering and pain. Then in the second line, when it's referring to all beings being more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, then it's good here then to understand what is meant by a wish-fulfilling jewel. So it's something that is meant, that it's something that fulfills whatever one prays for. So whatever one's wishes are, whatever one's prayers are, if one were to have this particular jewel, those would be fulfilled. So, of course, this is something that none of us have observed, so we can think about it in terms of what is seen as precious in the world or valuable, and that would be, say, gold and diamonds. And the reason that gold and diamonds are seen as precious is because if one has them, it's certainly in abundance. Whatever one wishes for, whatever one's prayers are, they can be fulfilled. So one's material comfort, one's wealth and physical well-being, this can be fulfilled if one is wealthy. One can also help those that one cares for, materially be of benefit to others. So we can think about having, if we were to have an abundance of gold and diamonds, well then our material wishes certainly could be fulfilled. And if we were to have a store of gold and diamonds, not only would we see this as greatly precious and valuable, but we would guard it. And not only would we take care and guard it, but we'd hide it from others. We'd make sure it was protected from others. The reason we see gold and diamonds as precious is because of what we can do with wealth. Knowing that when we sell our gold and diamonds with all this money, we can live a life of material comfort and we can help those that we care for. So it's for that reason we consider gold and diamonds to be so precious.
그래서 니네기 자침을 림부치데 너보디 림부치데 자침을에 샘전디게 딜레라와레스다 샘전디게 딜레라와 자체레스.
But here we're seeing that sentient beings are seen as incomparably more precious than even great wealth.
아 샘전디게 자체에 가는 차이를 대세다 도지발라에 대해서 송아전 소설량 무이다 배 뒤게 먹고 싶은데 샘전디게 가져야나 이게 간절해야지 판도야지 민도하더니 좋아하는 자기민도 되는 거는 저기 되는게 나한테 자체에 간에서 선배선도 호식으로.
This will sound strange because people strive to attain great wealth. This is what they value, this is what they long for. They don't see limitless sentient beings as being valuable. They have no aspiration in relation to all sentient beings. They have aspiration, though, for material wealth.
마도 아나 소소게 냠레 마제바이나 소소 고마유 탈바다 무유가 제 연에 변조 가서 여바이나 내려데나 탈바다 탐지 김비고 봐서도 도투고 말해 제가 도투고 말해서 제 체디기 디기 좀 주야라 빼마세 판도 심보도 예서 온다는 거지 다 semjen 디기 체디기 디기 주야자 마연바 나서 탈바다 탐지 김비고 나서 된다 약속을 가서는 상지고 봐들이 지금 체디 디기들 아니 디기들 탈비고 관데 약속을 탈비고 관데 아니 탈비고 토요도 게디네 띵이 대화장에 차고 강아서 균해야 말아 다 델에 가서는 상지고 관데 상지고 관 톱나 되네 게디네 대화도 장여를 현지도 동아세 디기도 빼 맞을 된다 개침을 두고 그래 그래서 디나네 아주 초도 교바디 상지고 관데 디토고 그래서 디토야라 가르된 토고서 semjeleden toptugure mado ani rimbochi deleden toptugu mares jesa semjeleden toptugu res jesa semjen dele toptugu inza semje deleden dön chodu duptugu dön cho yakshu du duptugu dus rimbochi deleden yakshu duptugu mene dene inza semjen dege jen rimbochi le tagba yibade zachi bu yibade yujin dires oda.
The reason that sentient beings are seen as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel is twofold. On one hand, what wealth can achieve, or a wish-fulfilling jewel can achieve, all of that can only be achieved in dependence on sentient beings. So with wealth, we will have material comfort such as a lovely home, delicious food, nice clothing. And all of this can only, though, be achieved not merely in dependence on wealth, but sentient beings. Likewise, whatever problems and difficulties we're experiencing in this life, wherever we need assistance and help, this comes about in dependence on sentient beings. So whether one has an abundance of wealth or just a little bit, or one's barely getting by, one requires sentient beings for all forms of material comfort. So from a worldly perspective, from the perspective just of this one mere life, sentient beings are tremendously kind, because merely having wealth but not having any indirect or direct interaction with others, we will not be able to overcome our problems and difficulties. And then thinking past this life, beyond this life, and thinking about completely transforming ourselves and attaining a state freed from problems and difficulties, that of liberation, or even the state of enlightenment. Such states can only be achieved in dependence on sentient beings. So it's for this reason that we see what's in the first line for us, with the thought of attaining enlightenment. So this is the third line in Tibetan, which is literally the thought of accomplishing the supreme purpose. The supreme purpose, or enlightenment, can only be achieved in dependence on sentient beings. And therefore, sentient beings are seen as incomparably more precious than even a wish-fulfilling jewel.
Dine yenza ane semjen di rinpoche le lhaba ki en tarba tabche kibe koba top tugu duwas ta tuk tugu yumzen kare labna ta yang bene zuke se dang doji pala katsi yoba ine di tagor chasang kora che se dang doji pala me kora che nanglo tsui deba ine zho doya ki paya che la marwa 아니 캬베 동마를 배야 말아. 제가 디 림보치 여베네 파 중국과 중진 무시라고 술 중국을 현생적으로 중국을 말해 현 요한면의 중심에 봐. 제가 현의 중제 현 요한 여발의 때네 소소리아 변주라도 제가 변주라와 될 때네 소소라기 제디기 디기 자면 디기 두고 해제돼. 안디 맞아. 다 소소기 지바로 따와이네. 현 소소기 지바다네. 지바다서 현 심전 고로 봐. 심전 맨날 지바다서 요 말해. 지바다서 맨날 소소 지바다제 아니 기위기 지바다비기 아니 수남사요 말해. 이 수남사 맨날 안 제와 치마를 양아 중아주기 디 지비티고 튕게 로지도 주야 말해. 지상 소소기 다들이나래 제와 치마이나 장아조 사야도에 롱주 라와디 가르스니 개원님마 심젤 바 짐바다비 디제고 차고 그래서 소소게 되는 중앙 차상 심젤에 되는 중앙에 샤스 시 심젤에 되는 중앙에 샤스 온도 섬다이와.
So no matter how wealthy an individual may be, this massive mountain of wealth that they may have, that alone cannot fill them. They cannot eat piles of gold and diamonds, nor can they live in a pile of gold and diamonds. Does not make for a comfortable home on its own. The only way that such wealth can benefit someone is if they were to trade it, to sell it. In order to sell it, they need others, they need a buyer. Moreover, they need a society that values what they have, that values gold and silver. So they are dependent. Someone with this great store of gold and diamonds is dependent on others, dependent on a society that values their gold and diamonds, depends on those whom with they can trade, they can sell their wealth. And thereafter they can have nutritious food and a lovely home. And these too are, of course, dependent on others. And moreover, if we then look at this not just from a worldly perspective, a single life perspective, but in terms of creating the causes for good rebirths, for our future rebirths to be comfortable and to aid our spiritual development, we need to practice generosity. And no matter how wealthy a person is, in order to practice generosity, they require other sentient beings. So whether one's wealth is of great abundance, or if one possesses no wealth and can only practice generosity visually, then, or through visualization, one requires other sentient beings. And without being able to practice generosity, one is not creating the causes that will ensure in our future lives we have an abundance of material wealth as well as other favorable circumstances to aid our spiritual development.
지상 칼라 사야디 라야디 셴레디네 거래 셴 근데 신바 내가 내게 지 깔래 자가 좀 해봐이나 땅아서 칼라라기 말아 지세 디네자 나아서 사야 동야 땅 둘로 고야다 차상 가르지 셴레디네 셴기 깔래 잡아도 될라 되네 나아서 용거래 지상 용거래 근데 나 저기 셈젤레 되네 나아서 샤사야래야다 안지게 둘로라야 안 되네게 아니 오마도야라야다 되게 사야도 릭당 맞서 베제타에 릭 망보치가 오라고. 때 미션다 뭐 마시면 타는 거 같이 있는 대sol에 때네 건축이 내가 깔래 잡을 때네 만솔이야 망보치라고. 당아 저기 되사 강보로 당아 주 취시해야 돼. 되는 삼다에 미션다에 깔래 잡지 강보에 수여시 된지 돼. 만서 되래 별로 되게 장아들이야 취시하고 하라데 샤라 되더라 말. 진짜 되는 이상 만두 삼다에 나도 체디기 마디 내가 그 삼다에 나도야. 현세대 마치 기회치보다 현세대 강조대 비주치보다 그린치 모임바지 지우치래 샤스고 왔다.
So here immediately in this first verse, we've been directed towards the kindness of others. And this, to understand this topic well, we start as always with the coarser presentations that are easy to understand, and then take that understanding to subtler levels. So if we think of the food that we eat, The only reason we have the nutritious food that we have is because of the endeavors of others. And we think here not just merely of the farmers, but all those involved in food production. And it's because of their endeavors that we are able to have the food that we eat. So here we can think of those so many who both directly and indirectly help us. And similarly, we think of the roles that animals play in both in both fertilizing of plants or fertilizing soil, as well as animals whose flesh we eat or who produce dairy products. We see how animals, in these ways, indirectly enable us to have a nutritious food. We think of the buildings we're sitting in now, whether the few that are here now with me, or those of you at home watching on YouTube. You're only in your homes because of the kindness of so many others. On an obvious level, the builders and the architects, but all those behind them who are involved in their education, in the mining of materials, the construction and design of components and so forth. So many who directly and indirectly help us.
Dinigi Shen said, Cetela Samtavina, Danazulia, Gay Chimbucha, Chimbu, and Bechu Chimbu Chagorwa, and Dimembi, Danazu Gewachima, Zanazugida, Gewachima Samtavine, Danazu Gewachima Miluchi, Yahuj Tobala, Danazu Cetela, Turum Sungura, Tizana Luma Yisu Yeju to be Turum Sonde, Karachos and Turum Garson was Shella, Niju Chigme, Shella, Luma Yisu Yuko, never Chigme, said. And Surum Sungora. Shen Mena, Surum Soya Chagoma. Shan Latin Sunne, Shen, Yoba Inza, Shan Latin and Surum Soya Kohapagore. Surum Soa Latine, and another Kiwachima, Tiensan, then Miluribush top to water. Chesa, and then Nason like you, but Miluribush top to water. Chesa, that said Elian to get Shen, Jimba, the Shen, Robokazi, Chetune, Jay, Jimbe, Yamlet, Robachedi. Chesa did Jebaina. Shen Yoba in the robot chair, Shen Mena to get being a robot to your mare. Chesna Di Yobanza, Delatine, Gewachima in there, and the Longe Apoyadi, Shen let in the truth to go. That's a big Yaman go and Shen let in the Servocumora, Shen get new what said Delia Servocumora. Chesna Dini Servocum Gobravati, Shen let in the Servocor. Chesna Shen let in the Servocor, Di Devola, the Carrion Grasson, Gewachima, Wompa Sawata, and Louis. Ni Suboyavo, and Gitini Ungorva. Chisa and Diniza Chisa Shala Dene Azuki, Gewachima Samtavena, Gewachima, Azu Milurimuch Toyata, and Tenji Milurimuch Toya, Masona Kemoyata, and Chiki, Di Dendelia, Umbo Sawa, La Sopa, Riba Dawa La Sopa, and Dine, and the Chiki, Twinjan Sawa, Yadi, Shala in the Truth. Chisa Denigi, Chimba, Tsuju, Seba, Tsunji, Yamlenche, Kokabra, Shanatine. To Yamnachi Kokabra, Delatine, Mansulitivo, Mahobana Yakum, Chinesa, Shen said, and a Bemasiki Chimbota, Chimurala, Pandova, and the Pando Chimbushi, Reshas, and Ditone, some Danachi Ligorova.
Reflecting on the kindness that others show us in this life, and our indispensable relationship of dependency with them, we take this understanding then and apply it to future lives. In our future lives, in order to continue our spiritual development, it's imperative we receive a precious human rebirth marked with the 18 freedoms and opportunities. And in order to achieve, at the very least, a human rebirth, one has to cultivate ethical restraint. And in order to have a mind that is restrained, a mind that is ethical, and thereby our physical and verbal behavior also being restrained, we require others to whom to practice ethically towards. So in order, therefore, to accumulate the primary cause for a good rebirth, that of ethical restraint, we require others. Similarly, to ensure that in our future lives we have abundance of resources and all favorable circumstances to aid our spiritual development, we need to practice generosity. And generosity being the wish to benefit others clearly requires others. And similarly, for our future lives to have complete sense faculty so as to aid our spiritual development and to have harmonious relationships with others, we need to practice patience, a mind that is undisturbed in the face of adversity. And therefore, we require others too to practice patience. So from the perspective both of this life's happiness and future life's happiness, we require others. All happiness comes about dependence on others.
And that Semjan Tamje Dewa, the Demba, Simdunga, Trawa, Dig me, Jihudu, the Indian Sanjoko Toba Chicken said, Semjangi Dondala and Sanjoko Toba Chicken state to Jaju Simki Goro. Chisan Diniki, Semjan Mena, D Dondani Toba Chicken said, Uriah Maro. Mevanza, Chisan Semjan Latine, Marangula, Jimbi Yamajia, Sudim Yamajia, Subi Yamajia, and the Jamba Comia, Ninja Comia. 장시에 쌤 냠내자 차서 셴sem절에 되는 거죠. 그래서 쌤 되니게 공부이나 가지고 공부할 때네 암탈 아니 가지고 뇽모 바치상 빠야다. 산지 공부 톱도야 돼. 대야 산지 공부 톱도야 돼. 셴sem절에 되는 연구도 제대 되네. 이제 쌤전세 배 맛이 랑래야 판도다. 판도 첨보지다. 아니 지게 이게 첨보 자 첨보 시우레샤 선지 루스는 상당 공부래지.
The third step in the reflection, having looked at this indispensable relationship that we have with others for happiness in this life, as well as for happiness in our future lives, we then take it to the third level to look towards the final goal, that of liberation from suffering in its entirety and the attainment of enlightenment. So having seen in the first two steps that for temporary happiness, others are indispensable and therefore are precious, so too is the case for enlightenment, because for enlightenment one has to practice ethical restraint, generosity, patience, but also love and compassion. And love has as its object, may others experience only happiness, may others accumulate the causes of happiness. So therefore it's clear that in order to generate love, others are indispensable. Similarly with compassion, which has as its object, may others be freed of suffering, may others eliminate the causes of suffering. Clearly too, for the generation of compassion, others are indispensable. And with others being indispensable for the generation of love and compassion, therefore they are indispensable for the generation of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So in this way we can see that others are indispensable for not only happiness in this life, happiness in our future lives, so therefore temporary happiness, but also for ultimate happiness of liberation and enlightenment. Others are indispensable, and therefore, because all temporary and ultimate happiness comes about in dependence on others, we see them as precious. We see them as more precious than even a wish-fulfilling jewel.
And dine sosurangi lobjong che chimine xian le dine xian zele lobjong xian gi zu ngar zo labje na ngar zu gi lobjong de xin hu le xian le dine ra hu le zan da ngar zu chue yam le che ba ne xian le dine ngar zu chue gi tue hu le chue su su yam le chi hu lo da su su gi chue yam le chi chi su su gi xi chue ina da su su gi da gi ru lobjong ra ka xin be ne labya su su gi xian labya de ne xian le dine la hu lo chue xie be ne xian le dine xie jie su su gi su nam sa wo ma do xian chue yin ge me na an chue xie sa me xian me na di me na su su chue xie bi ge su nam sa me je san su su gi chue nyam len jia da lu zhuang chang ya de xian le dine chang wu du su su gi xing ba di xian le ya xian le pen ba ji xian le xie jie su 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 nam sa wei ne xie sa xian da chi hu de je xian le dine xie la je san du ga ne de ne sam da me ga ne sam da xian se de be ma se za qian bu ji da rang le ya be pan do qian bu xiu jie qian bu xiu jin ba de da dine yum chen ma bu do some Taway, Shen said the round like Ye Chimbo Shu, Chimbachida, round like Pando Chimbo Shu, Imbachida, and then Ye Imbadi, and then go to war.
And the fourth step here is seeing and having come to see how precious others are and indispensable they are for temporary happiness as well as ultimate happiness. We then remind ourselves that all spiritual progression that we have already achieved and that we are still to achieve only comes about in dependence on the kindness of others. And this is a key point. All our good qualities come about in dependence on others. Right at the beginning of this talk, we spoke about how we need to hear the teachings from the enlightened Buddha, reflect on them, meditate on them. In order to hear teachings, this can only come about in dependence on a teacher. So clearly there's a relationship of dependency on others and a relationship of the kindness of others. And then when we think about this, and there'll be many subtler levels to think about this continuity of kindness of others. But what it comes down to is all our knowledge and all the experience that we've achieved in dependence on that knowledge and all the transformative experience that we are still to achieve in dependence on this knowledge. This comes about in dependence on the kindness of others. So reflecting then on this fourth step, as well as the three preceding steps, we come to see how interdependent we are with others, see how crucial they are to us too. And in this way, we come to value others, we come to hold others as dear.
And the Zachim Tingure that 60 by the Daughter Jebba Simple Show said the Gitinans, she has some gen said, but around like Ye Chimboda, Pando Chimboda, Bama Zachim Shu, Yibadpa, and Nichi, Resha, some Gidine, that Gidine, Nimachida, charging my Gidine or some Naya, Bama Chimboresha, Simple Zachim Shures, and Jebba Zingore, Daughter Jebba Simple Shows, Zingure, and do some more.
The verse concludes with, I will constantly practice holding them dear. This then is very clear. Having come to recognize in our reflections just that other sentient beings are our real source of joy, prosperity, and happiness, we come to hold them as dear, and this is something to do at all times, not just when we call it to mind, but to ensure that this becomes a guiding principle in our lives, always developing a sense of closeness and affection for others, and ensure that this becomes a guiding principle in our interactions with others, the sense of closeness, the sense of affection for others.
That Jebar Zinguri, Shen Jebar Zinguri said, Di Karatun Gorasne, now Zoliaka, Manache, the Karinyoka, Kashi Karli, Rang Jebar Zimbulu, Rang Jebar Zinje, Shen Yawa Dunje, the Shanlia, Nubikia, Shen Sokjaya, Shen Gurtaya, and the Jikshania Korasaya, and the Jikshania Chapaja, the nature Yomokia Chasa, Rang Jebar Zimbulo Tone, and Yomo Mushu and the Rashiniga Kamati. Just that Dineza, Yomokia, Dio Giles, Aleo, Koala Kichi. About me by Yomocha, the ranching the race. Just a ranching the part Dorjala, Dr. Jeba Shan Simjan, the Nigishan Simjan, Gadi Chimbo, do some Shan Jeba Zingure, Shala Jeba Zingure. She's a Shala Jeba by the ranching somebody, Shuchun, Shan Jeba Zimbulu, the Kazi, Shucher drove in there, ranching somebody Shuchun. Dine ranches and some of the Shuchun, so you more young to worry, then ranching Nigala Kanga. Chua to go. Just a douche in that ranches in some of the Durgoya in that did not to Gangache, Dilly, the Didro, or Dimaba Sevala, just a Shen Jabba Zingure, Dado Jabba Zingures, just a Jabba Zineg, Jabba Zinna, Yola, Dizina Sheba, as you give the dudes and rather getting Chimbo, the Pando Chimbo, but some down chorus. The next some time I do, Shen Jabba Zingure.
So this first verse is of great importance, recognizing that we want to be freed of pain and suffering. We need to recognize the causes for this. And when we look at ourselves with great honesty, we'll see that the rise of all our problems and suffering comes from our self-cherishing mind. The moment that we think of us solely of ourselves, the focus of our mind narrows. And because of this narrow mind, problems start appear for us. Things of really no significance appear as huge and insurmountable, leading to fear and discomfort arising. And from this then, our problems will grow and escalate. And not only is this experience as inner turmoil, but we then express it. Our mind of ethical restraint is lost, and we express it through physical or verbal actions to others. And thereby, this self-cherishing mind brings harm to others too. If we recognize this, we will come to then further see at a deeper level the great importance of others, because it's through valuing others, seeing them as precious, holding them as dear, genuinely feeling a sense of affection and closeness to others, that our self-cherishing mind will struggle to arise, because we are cherishing others. And the greater we hold a sense of closeness to others, the greater we value others, the more naturally habituated we will become to the other cherishing mind. And thereby, our mind will be broader. Our mind will not be overcome easily by problems and difficulties. We'll see things in a greater perspective, because we will not take things as personal, as being about ourselves, but we will rather value those that we are interacting with. It'll be much easier for us to generate a long-sighted goal, a goal of benefiting others.
na shen le jeba tsimba ina na deni ge jeba tsimba rang jizin to shen le jeba tsimba samdang de shen simje tamji le guzi che da an shen le jamba komya shen simje tamji dewa de dena sabe ge samna jamje komya shen simje de duwa da dana sabe ge ni je komya do sin ko res jiza shen le jeba tsine an jamba da ni je an shen la ge dine shen la guzi che da do sin ko res di jeba ina jiza deni ge nyamle jeba na an sa yu
One can imagine that if one has a genuine respect for others and affection for others and feels a genuine closeness to all others, that with such a basis, love and compassion can be generated with great ease and with great profundity within us, or great power within us. And thereby, in dependence on that, Buddhahood, the attainment of Buddhahood itself, grows ever nearer.
Shen le nang angzo le nyomo ke dang angzo ka nga chue chasa rang chi jing samlo tu ni ligo res chasa angzo rang chi jing ni pa dora che shen che ba jing samlo tang hu res dang angzo le shen le jamba da zewa da ni je ya go ke ma tu ba de rang chi jing samlo ti res chasa shen le jamba da zewa ni je ya go ke ba la ne rang chi jing samlo dora che shen che ba jing hu res de ni ge jam je nyam le ma che ba ina angzo sang ye da sang ye ko ba to to yo Dini inza shen jeba shen le jeba zibe sam dang je sin jen shen le jamba de zewa ni ji gong gu re su re na da dini inza da shen le zewa chen jeba zibe lo de ge wa la ni ga zhi gu re zin de xie ba na xin Langri Kitin Chibu in Bada Diniji, Simjan Jala Dine, Sosuke Saya, Yaragi Yoba, Dinis Jala Dine, and Sosuke Kawasa Yoba, Shala Dine Chibi Yamlanchigo, Shala Dine and Chu Yamlanchigo Yoba, Shala Dine Dushungu, Chedadu, Hengi Hanaya, Jin Chibu in Bada, Kidichibu, Yonadi, you do some down, some down, Dinig some down, do some down, or that is said, Bemasi Kitin Chibu, Sachimusha, Samje, and the Kitin Chibu, how to race. Dinij. 早前我的给的全部好沟通呢，第二年现在没有的，这个不会呢，反正就说是个这个早前我修正的第二这个讲不起个话，不过现在早前嘛真的那么现在搞来的几几个，啊，就是第二年我这那第二年讲这些的，搞这人现在呀讲这当，你就可没得休息的，其实咱当然就。 第二章就想来，甚至他们这里面被讲把的，在我研究过，第研究过把了，第呢，他甚至他们就上学过把托这边解决甚至我的，其实第一年能解把了，俺第那个先解把这边上了中国的，但第二章先解把是什么的，甚至的已经拿过来他话的，是不是他被认真都是现在上当过的，哦，都是那边能过的，当然这个，但第那个那这个。 냠는 셰디 다 데니기 토네 두시는 삼다야 지그레 지네 대지가 저게 다디 냠는 집이 시바사가 될 상유 쯤는 디기 두시는 갈래지 두시는 상유 쯤는 디기 안지 냠는 두수 나와레 사데 상유 쯤는 디기 기지 제행신비 토네 구송도 유제 제인비 토네 아니인기나 안 디링기 두시텔야 개발에 배치치는 냠는 지기인 선배고 어삼다야데 Samtadida, Samtane, and Yamle Jedi, that it is shared, because she had Jabba, she had Jabba Ziata, and Jala Jamjacom, the Yamle Jedi.
Our first talk together is, of course, impermanent, and now it has come to an end. So, to summarize what we've looked at this morning, we spoke about the purpose of Sakadawa, and that is to recall the great kindness of Buddha Shakyamuni and all that he achieved for sentient beings just like myself, or such as myself. Reflect on generating an appreciation for the Buddha, also then, secondly, rejoicing that we have created the causes to be in a world where his teachings remain and are still alive. And thereby, thirdly, commit to following the example of the Buddha, through hearing his teachings, reflecting and meditating on them, thereby transforming our way of thinking and living a life of great meaning. And the way to do this is, as we're looking at here in this text, to follow the example of Buddha Shakyamuni, as well as all the lineage of great practitioners who followed, such as the Bodhisattva Langri Tangpa. And here, in following their example, we look at the great kindness that others have shown us from lifetime to lifetime, up to this point and from this lifetime. We start by engaging in 4 points of meditation, reflecting on the great kindness that others directly and indirectly show us in this life, as well as the kindness that they directly and indirectly show us in relation to our being able to accumulate the causes to ensure that our future rebirths go well. And thirdly, we reflect on the kindness that others show us directly and indirectly as indispensable causes for our attainment of liberation and enlightenment. And then fourthly, we reflect on this indispensable relationship that we have with others in the sense of all good qualities that we have achieved and we will still achieve. All our spiritual developments comes about in dependence on the kindness of others. Through reflecting on these 4 points, we'll come to feel a closeness and an affection towards others. And this is the indispensable basis to overcome the cause of all our suffering, the self-cherishing mind, and develop its contrary mind, the other-cherishing mind. And this other-cherishing mind is the basis for cultivation of love and compassion and bodhicitta. And it's for these reasons that we come to see that sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, and thereby constantly hold them as dear.
ngaya ke ba ina nga zu gi cham ni ji ko me ya ya par che je sa nga zu gi di ne za ngaya che ke ma re se te ti ko da ngaya cha ko re se te di ko ma shi ya le.
This morning we've looked at how to generate love and compassion through seeing others as dear. In the next session, we'll look at one of the primary obstacles to doing so, that of pride. Pride, which serves as a great obstacle to valuing others and holding others as dear, and thereby being unable to generate love and compassion for others. So thank you very much.